It's on now,
Oh.
recording.
Okay. I'm going to ask you some open-ended questions, Mort, and just let you take it from there with the answers. And if we skip something, we can go back to it. But first I want to say that I'm Marion Gans, and I'm here with Gail Trell on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society to get your life story and your view of what life has been like for you in Stamford, where you have made such a significant contribution to the Jewish community. So good afternoon.
Hello, and thank you for coming.
Let's start at the beginning. You weren't born in Stamford.
No.
So where did you spend your childhood? Where were you born?
We lived in Monticello, New York, but my mother came down to Brooklyn, where her family lived, to have me born. She wanted to be with her mother. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but we lived up till the age of 5 in Monticello, New York.
And then you moved.
When the Depression came, my father lost his business in Monticello, and we moved down to Canarsie in New York to live with his parents. He was out of work for many years at that time. So we lived in Canarsie, and then we took an apartment, a little 3-room apartment on Park Place in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm. And that at that time was your brother, your older brother Harold?
My brother Harold, who was 3 years my senior.
Mm-hmm.
My mother and father, Harold, and myself.
Mm-hmm. What year were you born?
I was born on October 6, 1924.
Okay. So that makes you 85 now.
Excellent. I've had 85 very lucky years.
That's wonderful. Tell us a little about your education.
I went to public school and right across the street on Park Place, John Marshall Junior High School, public school 210. And after that I went to Boys High School. My undergraduate degree I took at City College in New York, and I took my master's degree at NYU.
What was your major at City?
Electronics.
Electronics.
Originally I'd hoped to be a journalist, because in public school I edited the newspaper. In high school I also edited the newspaper, and in college I also was on the newspapers. I also edited the technical journal in college. So I thought my career would be in journalism.
In journalism.
But when I went to the World's Fair in 1939, I guess, I went into the RCA building and I saw this little picture on a TV set, an RCA picture, being broadcast from the Empire State Building. And I said to myself, I'm going to get into television.
How amazing, really.
It changed my whole attitude as to what I wanted to do with my career. But
So you were really almost at the very beginning of it.
at the very beginning, yes, but not quite. I was supposed to graduate in 1944, but I never had a formal graduation from City College. In May of 1944, Dean Newman, the dean of the engineering school, called me in. He said, "Scheraga, we want to give you your degree now, and we want you to go down to a place called Oak Ridge, Tennessee." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I can't tell you." He said, "I want you to go down there, you'll meet a Dr. Hull. Don't ask any questions, they'll tell you what they want you to do to come aboard. It's very important to the war effort." And I was a kid from Brooklyn. I had never been out of Brooklyn. Took a train down to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which was just a mud hole at the time. That's where the gas diffusion plant was being built for the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb program.
And you didn't even know why you were going there?
No, I was the youngster of the fraternity, because I had skipped 4 times. But my fraternity brothers also had jobs in different parts of the Manhattan Project, and we had pieced together the secret work that was going on of the whole Manhattan Project. So when I went down to Oak Ridge, this Dr. Hull would not give me any answers. I wanted to know what I was supposed to do. And I blurted out, does this have anything to do with the Manhattan Project? End of interview.
Oh.
So I went back, the day after I got back, one of the students comes in, Dean Newman wants to see you. And in no uncertain terms, he said, you son of a bitch. I told you not to ask any questions. What's this nonsense about the Manhattan Project? Sitting there was another stranger who was an FBI man. So I told him how I had pieced together what was going on. They said, well, look, we want you to keep your mouth shut, pack your things, and now we want you down in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
They're sending you back.
Yeah. Well, the Navy was forming an engineering detachment, giving engineers uniforms and everything to join the Navy to work at Oak Ridge. So after about a month of the work I was doing, Dr. Hull called me and he said, we have a problem with you. You're too young to become an ensign. I said, what do I do now? He said, well, I want you to enlist in the Army, and after 6 weeks of basic training, we'll requisition you back. I said, I don't want any part of that, not getting screwed up in the Army, because the Air Force also has an engineering laboratory in Hampton, Virginia, doing research for the supersonic bombs and what have you. So I packed my things, left, went up to Hampton, Virginia, and enlisted in the Air Force.
That was all right with him, that you would enlist in the Air Force?
Yeah.
What were you then, 20 years old, Mort?
Pardon?
Were you 20 years old then?
Yeah.
My goodness.
So I enlisted in the Air Force when I was 20 years old, worked till the end of the war in the Air Force, then came up and found a job at Dumont Laboratories, which was one of the pioneering companies in the television industry.
Television, yes.
And then after I got settled in the laboratory at Dumont, I started writing.
Tell me about this book.
What started this, I was writing a monthly article for this company that was interested in putting out information on the growing video industry. And after a few months, they said, why don't you put this all into a book form? And it took me 3 years to write this basic handbook called the Video Handbook. And they printed about 75,000 copies of this that was sold all over the world. The Signal Corps, various engineering schools all used the Video Handbook.
And you wrote and edited this.
I wrote the book. It was edited by Joe Roche, whose name is also on that book, because I couldn't afford the drawings that are in there. That's a 1,000-page document. It not only includes the engineering parts of the television industry, but at night I lived in New Jersey at the time. We would go over to New York to the studios, which were broadcasting before it went commercial. And I watched programming. Macy's was experimenting. I could tell you a funny story, for example.
Do.
We were sitting in the control room. The pickup tube in the television camera in those days was an iconoscope, and it only saw blue. So when Macy's would put on fashion shows, the girls looked very weird, all with blue makeup. And it did not see red. One night they put on a fashion show where they had a model, a voluptuous model in a Titan evening gown. And she steps in front of the camera, because we never previewed these things, and it looks as though her whole body was bare, because the red did not come through on
She was wearing a red gown.
She was wearing a red gown.
Oh my.
Somebody screamed, knock the transmitter off the air before we lose our license. These were some of the stupid things that were going on in the early days of television. And I enjoyed every part of it. Some of that is in that handbook, how to put on a television show. Well, after a few years in the television department, the Dumont started to go into broadcasting or what have you, but they told me they wanted me to come into the instrument division and become part of the Dumont instrument division, which builds oscilloscopes. So I moved over to that division, and the long story is that after a few years, my 14th years at Dumont, I became general manager of the instrument division. But because all my profits of my division were being siphoned off to build the television studios, the Wanamaker building was used to build what was budgeted as a $2 million studio, turned out to be $20 million investment, which almost bankrupted the company. And I wasn't able to do any research and development for the instrument division, which was going downhill. So I left Dumont to form my own oscilloscope company called Analab Instrument Corporation.
How'd you pick that name?
Pardon?
Analab, how did you pick that name?
Analytical Laboratory Instruments.
Okay.
And we came out after about a year with one of the best oscilloscopes in the industry. And after 4 years, I sold the company to the Benrus Watch Company.
Oh my.
Because Benrus, like many other companies, were trying to get into the electronics business. And after a few years at Benrus, I left Benrus when the Singer Company asked me to come in and help manage five instrument companies in Bridgeport, companies that they had bought to make jobs for the working people, because Singer had moved their production of Singer sewing machines to Scotland, and they were trying to make work for these people. Well, it was a total mess because nobody moved up to Bridgeport. These people who didn't know how to solder, they didn't know how to build anything, and it became quite a mess. But after about a year or two, it was a hopeless situation, so I left there. And I formed another company called Competrol Corporation, which drew on much of the technology I had picked up in the Air Force laboratories. Competrol was so successful that we built about half the systems in nuclear power plants in this country.
My goodness.
And to make a long story short, we sold the company to Daimler-Benz of Germany. And after
About when was that?
I'm trying to think now, Marion. That was about 1970 or so.
Oh my goodness, way back then.
Yeah.
Mort, let's hold at this point on your professional career and talk a little bit about you personally. Somewhere along the line here, I believe you got married.
I wasn't even 21 at the time.
Oh my.
I was married on September 5th, 1945.
To Shoshana?
I married Susanna Rothberg, who was a brilliant scholar, who had a bachelor's in education, master's in psychology, and working on her doctorate in Jewish history. And
how did you meet?
it's a shame you have. There's a picture in my study of my cousin Joshua, who introduced me to her. And when I went down to we kept in touch while I was in the Air Force labs. As soon as I was released from the Air Force, we got married.
Mm-hmm.
So we were married in 1945.
Uh-huh. And you have 2 sons?
I have 2 sons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very proud of them. My oldest son is a professor at Fairfield University, doctorate in economics.
Mm-hmm.
His younger brother, 4 years his junior, Dr. Mort Scheraga, is the is director of research of EPA's global warming program. He has about 50 people reporting to him and represents the US government in all the worldwide conferences on global warming problems. Joel was part of a committee that got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007.
Oh my
Al
goodness.
Gore got only half of that prize. People don't know that. And he depended upon the work that Joel's committee was working on. So the committee really got the other half. And Joel is one of those people that got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007.
How cool is that? That is just wonderful.
So I'm very proud of both boys.
Yes, you have every right to be. And of course, they're very proud of you. You are not exactly without accomplishment. When you bought the businesses, or when you moved up to the businesses in Bridgeport, is that when you changed your residence and moved to Stamford?
Yes.
So that was...
I was commuting from Jersey to Bridgeport, and finally gave that up and bought this home in Stamford in 1966, I guess.
That was in North...
I think you looked at the same house that we bought.
That's very possible. Yes. Although we preceded you by several years in Stamford. So now tell us about your involvement in Stamford, which was on the community level, on the volunteer level.
Well, first of all, we went to go to Sholem for our synagogue affiliation, and there's where I met Walter Shepard-Towers, the beloved Mr. S, because I became a member of the board of Agudas Sholem, and Lou Lotstein asked me to set up a committee to work with Walter to build up the Hebrew school.
Oh, so this was before bicultural. This was for the Hebrew school.
This was before bicultural. And we raised the enrollment up to about 400 kids. And after a few years, Walter had this dream of building a day school, and he asked me to help him out. I said, Walter, I can't help him. Starting a new company called Control. I don't have the time. He says, you've got to help me do this. And the story is we found the land. Walter was the best fundraiser you ever met. Bought 13 beautiful acres in North Stamford. And I masterminded the building of that beautiful building that we have.
Yes.
I found the architect, the general contractor. To go back a bit, I had looked all over for an architect who had done something that could take advantage of the beautiful environment that we had on those 13 beautiful acres. And after going through about 3 or 4 architects, I was at a dinner with the opening of the Hebrew Art School for Music and Dance. I was on that board. And my kids went, Sue used to take them to New York to this music school that they went on Sundays for lessons. And at the dinner opening of the Hebrew Art School for Music and Dance in the building near Lincoln Center, I was sitting next to some guy with an Indian background. And I said, what's your affiliation that you're here? He said, I'm the architect. And I said, have you ever done a school in a rural environment? He said, I did the high school in Litchfield. So I came back and I said, Walter, I think I found our architect, Ashok Bhavnani.
Yes.
Is he Jewish? I said, no, I don't want him. I said, Walter, do me a favor, I'll ask him to come up on a Sunday. I want to see the school in Litchfield. A truck came up, and with Max Plum, he should rest in peace, we went up to Litchfield, and Walter's walking around, his eyes are popping out at seeing this beautiful building. He said, let's hire him. That's when we met Ashok Bhavnani.
And Nick Mercedes?
Then for the general contractor, Sam Heyman recommended we use Nick Mercedes. Well, Nick was not the low bidder on the first design that Ashok came up with. So I said to Nick, could you show us ways to pull cost out of your bid? I had asked the other company that was the architect for the shul to do the same thing, and they never came back to me.
Mm.
But Nick and Joe Comas, his brother-in-law, sat with Walter and me one night, pulling things out of the design without destroying the basic beauty of the building. And by midnight, we're still $50,000 above our budget, and I believe in meeting budgets, not letting things overrun. And Nick said to me, I'm tired, it's getting late, we'll make a donation to the Bicultural Day School of $50,000. These are some of the stories when I write a book someday, how this whole,
do that.
because I built a team of Nick, Ashok Bhavnani, and myself.
Yes.
And I used to come home every day from Ridgefield, Connecticut, where I had my plant for Computrol, and I'd stop in to see the work that was going on at the school. And I was a tough SOB because quality was extremely important to me. For example, I had donated the library, a substantial donation in memory of Shoshana. And because of the slope of the land, to get the high ceiling height, they had to make special air conditioning ducts that was very shallow. And I was in Europe at the time that those ducts were being installed. When I came back, they were using standard ducts and got permission from Bhavnani, unbeknownst to me, to use standard ducts, which had ribs in all the ceiling.
Oh.
I said, who gave you permission to do this, Nick? He said, Ashok Bhavnani, the architect. I said, tear it all out. I made them tear it all out. Nick and I are still the best of friends to this day.
You know, speaking of being the best of friends, I know there's a story about the fact that you, Ashok Bhavnani, and Nick Mercedes, I don't think past the first year ever had a formal contract, that everything was done at that school with a handshake.
Nick and I had a handshake. We had 7 expansions
Yes,
on a handshake.
7
This
expansions.
is the way I work with people. I developed a team. We all have mutual respect for each other. And that beautiful building came online.
Yes, I remember Mr. S. telling that story. I think now there's something like 80,000 square feet at Bicultural?
It's about 60,000.
60,000 square feet.
About 60,000.
Yes, and you've been there for every one of those expansions, 7 expansions after the first building.
Well, when I couldn't join the board of the Bicultural because Shoshana was teaching at the time, the bylaws don't permit people to be on the board if any of the board members have spouses in the school.
Right.
But when Shoshana died, I joined the board, got deeply involved in building the school, and they made me president that year. The bylaws allowed the presidency only 3 years, but Walter always found a way to get around the bylaws. I kid people, say that the reason they kept re-electing me, they said, someday you'll get it right, Scheraga.
Oh, yes.
At any rate,
They were just giving you another chance.
another chance.
Yes. And how many years more?
23 years.
23 years, yes.
And
Very,
believe me,
very productive years.
They were delightful years, but it took a lot of work, a lot of effort. But we have a beautiful facility there.
Yes. I'm sure it's one of the most beautiful Jewish day schools in the country. Should we show this now?
Please.
Can you zoom in on this?
I am.
Can you get a picture of this?
Mm-hmm.
That's the plaque that was given to Mort the year that he was honored at a bicultural anniversary dinner. And that was 2001. In
Yeah.
May.
Do you want to read it?
Pardon?
Do you want to read it?
Did you read
You
it?
want me to read it? In honor of Mort Scheraga, it is said that leadership rises to the demands of the time. Bicultural Day School bears the mark of a compassionate decision maker, a gifted strategist, and a talented diplomat. More than 20 productive seminal years in the school's history have been strengthened by his guidance. Bicultural stands taller and prouder in the community because of his presence as its representative. Above and beyond his practical contributions is his single-minded focus on what is best for the school in every area of endeavor. His devotion is priceless, and his friendship is treasured. The bicultural family offers its deepest gratitude to its president and champion. Presented on the occasion of the 45th anniversary celebration, May 20th, 2001.
Thank you very much, Mary.
My pleasure. You continued as president, actually, for 3 years after you were honored. And what initiated your retirement? Was it Mr. S's retirement?
But he retired, and I felt it was time to go. He is my dearest friend. We both felt it was time to pass the baton.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy to say that Paul Burr, Dr. Burr, who took over, has done a magnificent job.
Good.
So it's in good hands right now.
Mm-hmm. While you were president of Bicultural, I think you also had a hand in shaping and being part of some other organizations in Stanford. You want to tell us a little about those?
Well, I was on the board of Good of Shalom. My late wife Hilton was president of Jewish Family Service, and she asked me to, when she became president, to come up on the board of Jewish Family Service. I said, no, dear. If you have any problems, we'll discuss it, pillow talk, but it's your baby, and you're gonna. She had never organized a meeting in her life, but she did a magnificent job.
Yes, she did.
And behind the scenes, I joined a finance committee that she set up at Jewish Family Service, working with it, some other people. Lancome, particularly. So I got involved with Jewish Family Service, working behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Can we take a pause?
I think we should. Go.
Mort, I think in the history of organizations in Stanford, Jewish or non-Jewish, it's quite unusual for someone to remain at the head of an organization as president of a board as long as you did. And I think that part of that must have come from the relationship that you had with Walter Shokotowicz, Mr. S. Could you tell us a little about that?
Absolutely. I found Walter to be one of the most creative people I've ever met. There wasn't a day that went by without my talking to Walter. Even when I traveled abroad, I checked in at my hotel. I knew I could expect a letter from Walter. We kept in touch constantly, and together we not only built the building, but went into it in a way of curriculum and the environment that was created. I found Walter one of the most wonderful people to work with. It's most remarkable that anybody could go for 50 years to do the job that he did in developing the Bicultural Day School.
I know also that you have had your hand in other organizations in Stanford. Tell us a little about those.
I was one of the 7 people that helped found the Jewish Community Endowment Foundation. Refresh my memory.
That actually has made a very big impact in Stanford because it was the organization or the vehicle through which people were able to then contribute to other organizations. And you were one of the founders of that.
Yes.
And I know also in your role as president of the Board of Trustees of Bicultural, you served on the President's
I
Committee
was on the President's Committee.
of Federation. Yes.
Yes.
So you have made a mark and established a presence for bicultural and representing bicultural through all of those years with such dignity and such flair that I know the school was always very, very proud to have you at its helm and to have you represent it.
Marion, it was a labor of love for me, believe me.
I'm sure. Yes, yes. And the love was returned by the parents, by the faculty, and certainly by the administration. Mort, this has just been delightful for me to have this chance to talk to you. I want to thank you for allowing us to come to your home and have this conversation. You are one of the leading lights in the Stanford community and have been for many years. And I'm so glad that we'll now have this record for the archive of the Jewish Historical Society. So thank you.
Marion, I want to thank you not only for the opportunity to tell the story, but for the part you played with me at the Bicultural Day School. You work very much behind the scenes too. And I want to thank you for all the years you helped me at the Bicultural Day School.
My pleasure, and it was a labor of love.